Today I am going to be talking about practicing Chenrezig in our daily life. For the practice to be complete, we should not limit it to any particular session on the cushion, but try to include it in all our activities throughout the day. And much of what I'm going to cover today comes from Bokar Rinpoche's book, Chenrezig, Lord of Love. The first point I'm going to make does not come from the book, but that is you can say the mantra at any time. If you have a little bit of free time, just say it out loud or say it quietly. Chant it, Om Mani Padme Hung, Om Mani Padme Hung, Om Mani Padme Hung, Om Mani Padme Hung. If you're feeling down, sing the mantra. If you're feeling joyful, sing the mantra. When you've got a little time, sing the mantra or chant it, say it out loud. If you're in traffic, say the mantra. The Tibetans considered Chenrezig the protector of Tibet, and they frequently be chanting the mantra. And a tradition that they have is to carve the mantra on rocks and then make piles in various places. When I have been in Tibet, you'll find these piles of mani stones by the side of the road, at the bottom of cliffs, and a lot of other places too. So all of this accumulates merit, and then it would be good to dedicate the merit after you've said the mantra a little bit. Now, there is more to this would be Mahayana, chanting the mantra. So I am going to, first of all, explain the generation stage briefly, which is from the beginning of the practice to the chanting of the mantra and the visualization. So we are generating this visualization, and there is, you might say, a story that is unfolding where we're creating the visualization, we're making offerings to it, we're praising Chenrezig and so forth. And then after the mantra repetition, where we're visualizing ourselves as Chenrezig, liberating beings in the six realms, then we dissolve the visualization and then rest in the best that we can non-thought. That is the completion stage, that resting in, however brief it may be, this state of non-thought. And then when a thought arises, we then visualize ourselves as Chenrezig again. And then we chant these lines. My body, the bodies of others, and all appearances are the perfect form of the Sublime One. All sounds in the melody of the six syllables, all thoughts, the vastness of the great primordial wisdom. So that's where I'm going to go from here. When we're done with the practice, when we get up off of the cushion and go into our daily lives, we have the unity of appearance and emptiness, the unity of sound and emptiness, and the unity of thought and emptiness. That is the direction that we're going in. So this is Vajrayana here. There are four aspects that Bokar Rinpoche talks about here of bringing Chenrezig meditation into our daily lives. The first point is to let appearances be self-liberated. The second is to let the six sense groups be self-liberated. The third is to let circumstances be self-liberated. And he also mentions a very short practice to do while eating. So the first point, let appearances be self-liberated. Appearances have two aspects to them. There are external appearances, forms, sounds, smells, and so forth. And then there are internal appearances, thoughts and mental creations that result from our habitual patterns, our mental conditioning, our karma. We believe that there is intrinsic reality to both of these. It's part of this subject-object duality. We think that our thoughts, our judgments about what happens externally are real, as opposed to being interdependent. And this makes, you might say, solid and unchanging. The remedy for this is we don't negate appearances, but we don't affirm them either. We just look at them as appearances beyond concept. Now, this is difficult to do, but the point is that if we can at least contemplate this and maybe try it every once in a while, instead of negating or affirming appearances, just let it be. Bokar Rinpoche says, quote, "The master of appearances," end quote, "is our mind. It is our mind that's creating these appearances. The appearances don't do this. They just appear, and it is our mind that posits separate appearances outside of us and then inwardly judges them and forms all kinds of concepts about them. So since it is the mind that is the master of appearances, the point is to look at the essence of mind, to look within. And if you do a thorough investigation, you'll find you can't find anything. Try looking for a location for mind. What shape is it? What color is it? And so on and so forth. So this is the point here, that you're not going to find anything that you can identify with this in-depth search if you are doing it properly. The mind, its essence is inexpressible, it's empty. And actually, you can ask yourself, well, who's looking for this mind that can't find anything? And you're not going to find a looker either. But we posit reality to these thoughts. And we think somehow or another that this is real, but it's just appearance, emptiness, and there is nothing there that you might say, put your finger on. Now, there are two extremes that we can fall into. One is what's called eternalism, and that is that the mind is an individual entity. And the other extreme is nihilism. And this is, there is only nothingness. There is total non-existence. Of course, there can't be nothingness because there is appearance and we're aware of appearance. And this emptiness is, you could say it is potential. It's full of a potential because from emptiness, everything arises, all appearances, all thoughts. But it is not this eternalism, which is the mind being an individual entity. Tai Situ was once asked the question, is it a universal mind or is it individual mind? And his answer was, if it was universal mind, when the Buddha was enlightened, we'd all be enlightened. And in terms of an individual mind, he said, mind is not two. This is the way eternalistic individual entity is negated by saying it's not two. It's not one, and it's not two. Sounds like the Heart Sutra. We still have to know about the relative world, understand how it works, that it is relative and that it's not reality. So this is an important point. I remember Rinpoche telling this story one time. There was a Buddhist monk over in Asia that Rinpoche knew, and he had some direct experience of emptiness, but it wasn't stable. And he was telling people that he was going to go to another, maybe from Nepal to India. And the subject came up, well, are you taking money with you? And he said, well, what would I need with money? So we have to realize that the relative world works in its own way, which is cause and effect. The ultimate is free of cause and effect. So we need to keep this understanding along with this idea that mind is beyond the relative. Bokar Rinpoche sums this section up by saying this is the seeing of Chenrezig, the great compassionate one. The next point is let the six sense groups be self-liberated. So we contact phenomena through our six senses or six sense groups, which is our five senses and our mind, consciousness, and sense. So we have a sense organ, a sense object, and then a sense consciousness. So we've got the ear, sound, auditory consciousness, eye, form, visual consciousness, and on down the line for nose, tongue, skin, the sense of touch, and then mind, and it is mental objects, and then mental consciousness. These are the six sense consciousnesses. There is no duality between these sense consciousnesses and the objects, the consciousness that grasps and the objects, but we add duality and separation, that I am aware of this form that is outside of myself. And then we develop classifications about things. This is good or bad. We develop attachment or aversion. We pile on all kinds of baggage. I think that's a good way to put it. We have just all kinds of descriptions for whatever our five senses attach to. And it's interesting that different people can see the same object very differently. You've all heard me, I think, talk about the singing bowl here that my mother and father, when they were over in India or Nepal, bought. And then when they brought it home, they put a potted plant in it. So that's how they perceive this. And if I had an animal here and filled it up with water and put it on the floor, the dog would think that it was a great thing to drink out of, and so on down the line. That all of this is things that we ordinary beings place on objects. So these six sense groups, he uses the term self-captive. They're a result of our ego, thinking that we are separate, independent, and there is something permanent and unchanging about our ego and our view of ourselves. Now, with recognition of the true nature of these objects of our senses, they are liberated. We are no longer grasping at them. With this recognition, the appearance and the liberation occur simultaneously. There's nothing that has to be done to liberate them besides just the recognition. It's only the mind that engenders attachment and aversion. It's not the objects. Any object of the senses, they don't decide whether they are agreeable or disagreeable. And as I said, it can be different for different people, and even the same person at different times, an object of the senses. Again, the Tibetans really like hot peppers. I remember having Tibetans here at the center to teach, and we would specifically put out hot peppers and see them literally lick the plate. And myself, one hot pepper is too many. So is it in the hot pepper or is it in the person that's got it in their mouth? So it's important to realize that attachment and aversion are empty. If we can understand that, they too will free themselves and liberate themselves. And these sense groups, they are empty. It's difficult to understand this because we are so attached to judging whatever comes in through our senses. But if we can recognize this, they will be liberated without having to act. Just recognition is all that it takes. Bokar Rinpoche sums this up by saying, letting the six sense groups be self-liberated is the meditation in daily life of the great compassionate one. The next topic is let circumstances be self-liberated. This requires mindfulness and awareness. Actually, the other two categories also require mindfulness and awareness. We need to pay attention to what's going on rather than just falling into familiar habitual patterns. You could talk about the eight worldly concerns: pain and pleasure, gain and loss, fame and insignificance, praise and blame. And then there are other things, judgments that we place on our circumstances. And when we have good circumstances, we feel joyful inside. It can be being with friends. It can be doing certain activities, accomplishing a goal, whatever. So we attribute reality to this feeling of joy. On the other end, it's a result of causes and conditions, which are impermanent and interdependent. So they really don't have any reality. It's the mind that is experiencing this. So it's good for us to observe the mind that experiences it. And again, do that examination of what is the mind, where is the mind, and so forth. And we realize then, if we do this thoroughly, what appears to be happiness does not have any actual outer identity. It's an inner identification that we are placing on these circumstances. And again, with recognition, the good circumstances are self-liberated. You don't have to do anything to liberate them, just this recognition. And the same thing for unfavorable circumstances: pain, sickness, poverty, loss, blame, and so forth. The essence of these judgments is our mind. Again, the mind is empty, and we can self-liberate these negative experiences purely by looking at the nature of mind. This might seem to be contrary to the way the world works, but in terms of ultimate reality, it doesn't matter because it's just temporary and due to causes and conditions. In this idea of emptiness, it's free of this idea of enemies, of disagreeable words, of sickness, and so forth. They don't have any inherent reality. They are imputed by our mind. So everything that appears as suffering is actually devoid of inherent reality. Again, to repeat myself, to recognize this self-liberates all of these different types of manifestations and circumstances. When you really look at it through this ultimate reality, happiness and suffering are just the play of the mind without any actual reality. We don't need to accept or reject them. We can let these circumstances be self-liberated. And this is the action of the great compassionate one. So Bokar Rinpoche says these aspects are the continuation of practice that we should apply throughout the day. And again, this is very advanced. This is really bordering on Mahamudra practice. but at least it's good to know this. Finally, he has a short practice to do when you're eating. If you want to do this, this is a little different. I've not heard Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche talk about this practice. So during the meal, you think that you are Chenrezig, and the food that is in front of you becomes nectar or dutse, and you're offering it to the deity, which is you as Chenrezig. And he has a little chant here, which I'll read it the Tibetan and I'll give you the translation. And I could email it to you if you'd like. Jowo kungi magu kudokar zoksanje ki ulagyan tuje chengi drolazik chenrezik la chopabol. Lord, with white body stained by no defect, the perfect Buddha ornaments your head. You look with the eyes of compassion upon beings. To you, Chenrezig, I offer this food.